So is it going to be DoorDash or Amazon? Now, you should definitely not go with Amazon.
What?
Hey, this is Gerge with the Pragmatic Engineer. Today I'm going to answer a question that I got from a friend who has an offer at DoorDash and an Amazon, and they're not sure how to decide. So this person was telling me how both the Amazon and the DoorDash offer look really good. They both look impactful, they both look interesting, and the compensation is similar in both cases. This person has about 4 years of experience, and both offers are at the Eng 2 level, so L5 for Amazon and L4 for DoorDash. So I'm going to tell you 2 ways to evaluate the role. I'll tell you how I used to evaluate roles when I was a few years into my career, and now I'll tell you what I've learned since and now how I evaluate roles. So a first point about compensation. Even if the 2 offers look roughly equal, Amazon's equity vesting schedule is very back heavy. So the vesting schedule that I've heard multiple times up to a few months ago was 5, 15, 40, and 40%. So you get 5% of your initial grant in the first year, 15 in the next one, and then 40% and 40% in the third and in the fourth year. Now, because of this, Amazon's equity grants are pretty large and they're hard to compete with, but if you don't stay until year 3, you leave a bunch of money on the table. And Amazon's culture is unique, as with every company. Not everyone will stay there for 4 years. Now, on the other hand, the vesting schedule, the likes of DoorDash, Uber, Google, Facebook, etc., there's a 1-year cliff, which by the way, Amazon has as well. And from there on, you get even vesting every single month. So every year you would get about 25% of your equity vested. Now, Amazon, as far as I know, in the first few years, they do not do top-ups. Other companies like Uber did top up your equity every single year with the bonuses. I don't know for sure if DoorDash does it. This person should ask their recruiter. I assume that they probably would do. Now let's go back to how I used to evaluate offers like this. First, I would look at, well, what is the company culture like? And how do you find about the company culture? Well, you go to Glassdoor and look at the reviews. So let's check it out what Glassdoor says. Let's start with Amazon, as Amazon has a lot of reviews. So in our case, we're going to narrow it down to software engineers and to the Bay Area. Alright, so here the reviews are pretty good. They're saying great work culture, working on important problems. Cons, no provided meals, only snacks. I guess during COVID, it doesn't really matter. Good start to career, learning lots, burnout caused by frugality, and insisting on SDE ownership. Yeah, I have a few thoughts about this myself. I'll share that a bit later. Great company, political sometimes, which makes it tough to get things done. I'm going to tell you, every big company gets political after a while, just because there's a bunch of people who all want to do some different stuff. And somehow people need to influence each other. Perfect company. Amazon is great. Can be hectic with work from home schedules, which is interesting. Why would a software engineer mention work from home during COVID when they were probably working from home? But, can be political, pretty critical, but learn fast. Work with many solidified senior engineers. Great company, lots of opportunities. Cons, bad, but nothing has been disconnected. Anyway, these reviews seem like pretty fine. They don't say anything really beyond the fact that it can be political and it can be hard, but there's a lot of growth, which sounds somewhat right. Let's see what DoorDash says. So here they say focus execution, laser focus on the vision. Cons, it's not a place to coast. The whole company works hard. Next one, great for growth. You're given lots of responsibility. More responsibility means more stress. I can attest to that. That's how things are. Some people don't like this. I personally prefer this kind of approach. Tattered, money, young vibes, some nice people, most left already. Cons, lack of important processes, engineering is naive, management goes insanely political. And this is a 1-star review. Didn't see a 1-star review on the first page of Amazon. There probably would be if I scroll down. Doesn't get much better, competitive compensation, typical struggles of exponential growth, and we're now going back to reviews. Now, if you look at the date of the reviews, after 4 reviews or 5 reviews, we're already in 2019. Now at Amazon, on the first page, I'm still only at July. So you can see the number of reviews is very different. And just from the reviews, my old self would have been a bit skeptic. I would have been like, hold on, everyone at Amazon the past couple of months has just said really good things about them. The past 10 reviews have been really 4 or 5 stars, a bit political, but it's really good growth. At DoorDash, it was positive reviews, but there was that 1-star review, 1 out of 5, that seemed as like a terrible place and really political, and that person probably just left. So my old self would have preferred Amazon. Now, having been in the industry for a while, I've learned to not fully trust Glassdoor, because guess what type of review will always be on Glassdoor? The disgruntled employee. If you leave a company, there's a lot higher chance you're going to go to Glassdoor and leave a negative review, which this person did. Just be mindful of taking Glassdoor at its face value. Now, the other thing that my old me would have done, and I still sometimes do, is speculate how the equity would be doing. because some part of your compensation will be equity. The more senior you are, the bigger it is. In the Bay Area, if you're L5 or above, you could get roughly the same amount of equity per year as your base salary. In this L4 position, I'm assuming it's not really more than 50% of their base salary, but still, if the equity does well, you could do very well. So let's look at the equity trajectory of these two companies. So Amazon stock has just been on a very steady rise for the past years. It's going one way, it's going up. And you can see that it's been in place since COVID, which actually is not too surprising. Is everyone guess on which direction the equity will be going? My guess will be that it will keep going up just because Amazon is expanding aggressively. They are taking on new verticals from the likes of AWS to e-commerce to investing heavily in Alexa and a bunch of other areas. So you never know what the future brings, but looking back to where the stock was 4 years ago, which was a quarter of where it is, this person could do really well with their equity package if Amazon stock 4x's in the next 4 years, which again, we don't know if it will do. Now let's look at Doordash. Now, DoorDash has barely just gone IPO, and their IPO was spectacular. They raised financing at a $16 billion valuation, and on the first day of trading, they were already trading at about $60 billion. That's a 4x increase. So if there was a chart, DoorDash would have had a similar growth only with private equity, not with the public markets. Since the IPO of less than a month, their stock has been flat or not changing much, or you could say is going down, whatnot. Anyways, anyone guess on which way the equity will be going from here? This was pretty similar to how Uber's equity price was hard to predict where it would go after it went public. Uber went public at $45. The stock steadily fell all the way to about like $29 6 months in. Now, 6 months in was the point where people who were employees could sell. So this was a major disappointment for many people, and it had some tax implications on others. Then the stock started to steadily climb until the beginning of 2020. And with COVID, it went to an all-time low of $21. And from there on, it's been steadily growing and growing. It had a peak of $56. So if you put a kind of chart on this, you would see that Uber stock is trending upwards. Again, if anyone guess on where the stock will go, having worked at Uber, I'm personally bullish on the model, and I think they're growing market share across the world. Don't forget, they're also direct competitors with DoorDash. So you can speculate. It's likely both of those stocks will go up. I would say DoorDash maybe has a bit higher risk of being more volatile. It could also drop a lot more. Maybe it could go even further higher up. Who knows? Amazon seems a bit more steady in terms of stock value. They're everywhere. They have a lot of hedging. If Amazon drops by some crazy amount, DoorDash will probably drop as well. Now, the other place that a lot of people go to, and I didn't do this years ago because it just wasn't there, but Blind. Blind is an anonymous forum where people just share things anonymously, and people who work at tech companies. And it's pretty common to go into Blind and ask people about what is the culture like at this and this company that I got an offer for, and what do you think my offer is like? And then people from that company actually often reply. So let's see what Blind has to say about Amazon and DoorDash. So I'll start with Amazon again, and I'll search for culture. Now, Blind is overwhelmingly used by software engineers. There's starting to be a lot of non-software professionals, but you don't need to worry too much about specifying software engineering. And so you can kind of assume by default that's what it's going to be. So for some of the few articles, PIP culture at Amazon, that's interesting. AWS culture, Boulder culture, don't care, this is San Francisco. PIP culture, Amazon versus Alsatian culture. PIP culture, wow, there's a lot of PIP culture. Amazon versus Facebook culture, and Amazon Lab 26 culture. Now, this person didn't specify, but in San Francisco, Lab 26 is pretty big, so maybe that's where they got their offer from. I don't know. Let's check it out. Let's check out Lab 26 culture. All right, so this post is from June. Intel is probably better than Lab 26 as of now, says someone from Amazon. During the interview, I saw some interviewers be rude. That's the stock price speaking. All right, so not too much from Lab 26, but it seems it's okay. Hard to tell. Amazon versus Facebook culture. This is from 2017, so this is 3 years ago. This might not be really indicative. You don't need to memorize the leadership principles at Facebook. That's funny. In Amazon, you have to perform like a person will level up to be called a good performer. Yeah, but that's the same everywhere. I totally agree with this Facebook commenter. Facebook, only one rule, make manager like you. Not sure how Amazon works. Amazon is mostly the same. I mean, your manager needs to like you to get a good performance review anyway, and your manager typically likes you because you're doing good work. Amazon has a culture. Okay, but that's from Apple. All right, here's someone from Amazon. I usually pay more attention to people inside the company, but don't forget, these people could also be disgruntled on their way out of the company. Amazon is all about taking ownership of job and career path. If you're a doer and have no problem leading, you will love it. If you don't do as little as possible to survive, then you'll stay or go to Microsoft. All right, let's see the other one. Amazon versus Alsatian. Okay, Amazon and Alsatian in India. So this is India. This might be less relevant. I mean, culture across companies will have some similarities, but different regions will have different culture. I saw this at Uber. Amsterdam had different culture than San Francisco and Hyderabad or Bangalore and Aarhus. There were some shared things that you could see were common, but there's a bunch of local differences. But here's an interesting one from Amazon. What people don't realize, Amazon doesn't give raises unless you get promoted or the stock goes up. Thus, Amazon had a perception advantage when they give out job offers because the number looks higher simply because it's more or less fixed total compensation for the next 3-4 years. I agree with this. Amazon has been doing this. This is also the back heavy vesting, and their stock has been going steadily up, so this strategy is working. It will keep working until the stock steadily goes up or until some of their competitors start to grow faster than Amazon does. All right, not much more here on this thread. Let's go into pip culture. Amazon, we pipped 2 grads on my new team. Great motivation for engineers to perform and avoid brittle performers. I'll tell you, that's some sort of motivation. I'm not sure it's great motivation. Good for maintaining a high talent bar, only to keep decent talent. If this wasn't pip, culture would be full of slackers and rest investors like Microsoft. Yeah, so there's 2 sides of the coin. I mean, pipping people is stressful for people around and the people impacted. Netflix has a similar culture. They're pretty open about it as well. Now, I've heard that Amazon can be cutthroat as well, especially when you enter. Again, it's part of their culture. I personally picked Amazon for my FANG. It's definitely FANG for me. Okay. People from Apple talking here. Troll. Okay. Let's look at the other pip culture thread. This is someone making an SD2 role. They were scared of pip culture. They're asking how much this happened. And wow, there was a lot of comments, 280 comments. I was a top performer at Amazon, still got pipped. One of the worst companies to work for. All right, well, that sounds tough luck. And also, this person seems to now working at Palo Alto Networks, also not a bad company. Definitely Amazon is one of the shittiest companies in the world. This is what I'm talking about. Everyone has different experiences, and it's hard to tell if it's just a company-wide thing, although it does seem that Amazon will encourage this, or it's also to do with your team and your manager. I have 9 years of experience, but I never imagined I would go through this much paranoia and anxiety after receiving an offer from one of the world's successful company. I'm confused to proceed. Oh, okay, so they haven't taken the offer. They're just stressed out because they're reading blind. This is also a thing, by the way. Unfortunately, I've now shown you blind. If you're going to read blind, you're going to get a bunch of negativity. So people often go to blind to complain. You're not going to hear too many happy stories. I would say the ratio of unhappy people sharing stuff is probably 70% versus happy people sharing stuff maybe like 10 or 20%. All right, so this comment is pretty much pure gold because they do give you good insight into Amazon. This is probably from a manager because they're using all the terms. So each director has a target of achieving 6% unregulated attrition in their org between the 1st of April to the 31st of March for the team size as of 1st of April. So basically Amazon has roughly a pip target. And by the way, I've heard something similar from people who worked at Amazon in some of the leadership positions, although they never told me a specific percentage, but I did hear that there is a target. Now, most of these unregulated attritions would be the LEs. LEs means the least effective rating. There's a different rating. It's basically the bottom of the bucket for calibration. And I'll probably have to make a calibration video on how managers typically calibrate at all tech companies. And if you're interested in calibration, just drop a comment because I might be making a video on how calibration works at tech companies. So least effective ratings comes from the Q1 OLR, and OLR is Organizational Leadership Review. That's the annual review. Oh, and the LE target is 5%. So in bucketing, they do have a target, which again is pretty common. If you're in the least effective bucket, you're probably going to be put on a PIP and be unregulated attrition. So assuming team strengths remain the same between January and April, 6% comes from the LE bucket. So if you get a hike or RSU refreshes, most likely you will be safe, which is true. It means that you're probably put on a high performer bucket. Most of the people receive some of the low performance feedback, end up becoming LEs, also true. Before PIP, you get verbal warnings, The point is, Amazon does seem to be more cutthroat than, for example, Uber in the early years. Although later at Uber, I also saw some inclination itching towards the Amazon model, but it definitely wasn't a target like this. So purely from a performance and stress perspective, if you join Amazon in the first year, everyone will be at high risk and being in a low performance bucket. It's 5% of people, which means typically 1 out of 20. So if you do well, you'll be fine. And if you go through the first year and you're a high performer, you're probably going to be coasting. So there we have it on Blind. Blind gives actually a bit better review of the internal company general culture than I would have expected, and definitely I did not have access to this back in the day. I only look at Glassdoor, where the details are not nearly as good as they are on Blind. Let's take a quick look at Doordash to see what the culture like is there. We got a bunch of posts from March, so let's look at those. First one, I'm accepting an offer for DoorDash. Don't understand the culture there. What's it like? Great. Former co-worker there. She likes it, but work-life balance is not part, but it's part of the IPO outlook. Yeah, before the IPO, you need to work hard. There's a bunch of stuff that needs to get done. I'm assuming they were doing. Here's another thread. Thanks. Depends on the team you're joining. Yeah. How's the infra team? I should know someone on the infra team, so I'm assuming it should be pretty okay on the infra team. And let's see that thread that they linked. Alright, so here's a thread from February. A lot of information related to DoorDash on Blind is super outdated, says someone in February. Fire is no longer a thing since stability has improved, a lot more focus on hardening system, adding robustness, work-life balance 40 hours, second use of modern technologies, another person for 2 years, things have improved with work-life balance, engineering culture, and so on. Which, by the way, I would assume is the case because I see a lot of parallels between Uber and DoorDash. DoorDash started years later than Uber, and they have a similar growth rate. I mean, they have already surpassed Uber in terms of market share in the US. And Uber, when I joined in 2016, was really hectic. Work-life balance was crazy. The first project I joined, the Uber app rewrite, we were working on the weekends and putting in 12-hour days. And it's changed dramatically, especially as we got nearer to the IPO and post-IPO even more. It became a pretty good place work-life balance-wise, and you couldn't compare it to the old Uber, the pre-IPO, when we were just growing. So I expect this will be the case with DoorDash. And it seems people are confirming the same thing. All right, some more DoorDash culture. It depends on your team. Some managers are great, others not so much. And by the way, this is really true. It really depends on your team in any company. You know, we could ask about Google, Facebook, DoorDash, Airbnb, Uber, Lyft, a small company, new startup, big company, IBM, GE. It really depends on the team. If you have a great manager and a great team, they can create a culture that is a really unique culture. It could be terrible, even in a good company, and it could be really good, even in a terrible company. I know some terrible companies where the engineering culture is crazy bad, and there's pockets of really good teams where, for example, there was a person who joined our team at Uber at Amsterdam from a company which engineering culture was a lot worse than Uber's. And I know because I interviewed a bunch of people and a lot of people came over and they told me the same thing. We love it here at Uber. And this one person, when back to that company, they said they just don't like the Uber engineering culture. That they felt they had too much freedom and they liked that things were kind of stable at the old place. And they went back to one of the teams that I've consistently heard had a really good engineering culture with a really great manager at this company. So you cannot judge. So now when we reflect on the reviews with Amazon and DoorDash, it seems, especially with the insights from Blind, is Amazon is a lot more cutthroat. They do have PIP targets. You do learn a lot based on the reviews. And at DoorDash, the culture seems to have been hectic back in the day, and now is getting a lot better. So let's start with how I used to evaluate my last few offers and what changed really. And the big thing that changed is I stopped looking only at public forums. These public forums are great. They give you a bunch of insider information that you wouldn't have, but they're not the people you're going to be working with, and you're really far away from that. So first of all, I will start to talk or find people who know people at these companies. And I happen to be a person who knows people who currently work at DoorDash, who used to be my colleagues, and I know people who either used to work at Amazon or work at Amazon right now. So even if you don't know people in your network, you should reach out to these people. And this friend of mine was probably right to reach out to me because I have a bit of additional information. And the information that I have is that I worked with some really great people at Uber who I really respected in terms of people who got things done, had high integrity, and a bunch of them left for DoorDash. My mentor, who I really enjoyed working with, and I learned so much from her, she joined DoorDash as well. I know counting 3 great engineering leaders who I interacted with, and I got along with them really well. I found them really inspiring, and the people I talked to also told me how they're really good leaders and really pushing the envelope. They went to DoorDash. I have a friend who joined a different company after Uber, and they were really disappointed. The manager did a great sell for them. They were super excited to join this company, But 2 months in, they just saw this is not that culture. They also went to DoorDash. I just recently talked with them, and they told me that the culture feels like it was the kind of fast-moving Uber culture, let's say 4 years ago, without the craziness. But he just felt that it feels like there's so much opportunity and there's so much energy anywhere. And he said he loves that he joined this company. So anyway, that's a pocket of information. And it seems that there are some teams at DoorDash that are full of energy. They obviously are in a great run. They just had an IPO. Market share keeps growing. I'm sure there's plans of expansion, probably internationally as well. There's going to be a lot of challenges, and there's going to be a lot of competition. They keep competing with Uber, they keep competing with Takeaway.com, and they're going to compete with whoever they're going to enter into the food delivery market. They're going to indirectly compete potentially with Amazon as well. Amazon invested in Deliveroo, and although Deliveroo is not in the US, if DoorDash expands outside of the US, they're going to find themselves going against that company as well. Now, I also have some insights into Amazon or people who worked at Amazon. Now, Amazon gets tricky because it's vast. DoorDash is probably 3,000 people. Amazon is probably 100,000 people or so. I don't have the exact Amazon numbers, but it's a crazy difference. So just one org within Amazon will be bigger than DoorDash. The Alexa org is about 10,000 people, not all software engineers, but it's still bigger than DoorDash, and it's just Alexa. So the thing that I've seen with Amazon, and I keep hearing, especially from the Bay Area and people who worked at Amazon and later I worked at Uber with, is the Amazon culture is different. It is cutthroat. They will let people go. They do have these targets of pipping people, and they'll just do it. It's just part of the culture. It's just cutting the fat every single year and making sure that the rest of the company is motivated and keeps moving. And this is a type of motivation that they use there. The Amazon culture is, from what I've heard, extremely frugal. So you will not get additional budget for all sorts of stuff. Like you get one charger, and if you lose that charger within 2 years, you need to buy it. At the likes of Uber, DoorDash, Facebook, Google, you can just ask for a new charger, or there's a bunch of chargers installed in the offices as well, which I've heard some of the Amazon offices don't even have. And a lot of tech companies, you get a bunch of additional perks that are on top of your salary. So things like food, things like event budgets, things like gym memberships, and so on. Amazon, from what I heard, has none of that. So they will give you cash, but nothing else. And even for things like team events or gifts, the budget will be really, really stingy. It's a very efficient culture. The people who came over to Uber from Amazon also brought a lot of the Amazon culture, which is double-sided. It's pretty good because it's really focused on execution, efficiency, including efficiency with the meetings. So most companies will not do the Amazon-style meetings where you have an agenda prepared up front and everyone reads that agenda at the beginning of the meeting and you have really efficient discussions. But at the same time, I was really surprised to hear from people who worked at Amazon how despite all this efficiency, they were a lot more inefficient in some ways because, for example, they used in-person meetings to go through planning discussions instead of something like Google Docs where they add comments. And some of the newer startups, especially Uber, we lived on Google Docs and we would just do async feedback, we would talk through it. And some people said like, oh wow, Uber's making faster decisions in some ways than Amazon is. So that's a generic culture. But what I would do, and what I have done at Uber as well, is reverse interview your team. Now, few people realize once you have an offer, you are in charge. The company wants to hire you and you have some space to wiggle. A lot of people use this to negotiate compensation, which by the way you should. So this person should go back to Amazon and DoorDash and negotiate compensation. In the case of DoorDash, you probably want to negotiate higher stock and a sign-on bonus. And in the case of Amazon, negotiation is likely more difficult because they probably have more bands, but you still should negotiate a sign-on bonus, especially to try to gap for that very back-heavy vesting. Now, what almost no one does, but I do, and I recommend people to do, is before making a decision, ask to talk to your future manager and potentially a future team member. And this is a place where you should ask the things that you really care about. Now, this friend of mine, they care about career growth. So what I would do is I would ask, I'd like to talk to my future manager before I accept because I need to get some more information on the likes of career growth, opportunities, and impact. And then go there to that discussion and have a list of questions and talk to them. So for example, ask them, tell me, what does the team work on? How do people typically get promoted? Who was the last person you promoted and why? How do performance reviews go? What kind of coaching and mentorship do you offer to people? What do you expect from people? How do you see people growing? And so on. Make a list of your own questions. Don't just use these questions that I came up, but ask about what matters to you. Now, before I joined Uber, I got an offer, and it was a really good offer. And I was ready to accept on the spot, but I didn't. I did two things. I negotiated the offer, and I negotiated an extra 10% or so, which was great because I probably would have accepted otherwise, so it was pretty much a free bonus on top of it. But the second thing I did was I reverse interviewed my future manager and one of the most senior team members. And this was because I was really skeptical about Uber in Amsterdam. And I did this because I had a similar setup before where I worked with a US company in a European office, which felt in some ways like a satellite office. So when I worked at Microsoft/Skype, we worked with the Xbox team where there were 3,000 people in Redmond and Seattle. And we had 20 people working on Xbox One in London. And sometimes it felt that we were not part of that bigger group. So I wanted to understand if this would be the case at Uber in Amsterdam, because if this would have been the case, even with the high offer, I might have not accepted it. And I wanted to see how my future manager and the most senior engineer thinks about the opportunities. So what I asked about in this reverse interview, I asked them about what they're excited about, why they decide to move to Amsterdam, why they believe that the site will grow, what their vision is about the site. And my manager was on fire. He said that he really believes in this office. He thinks we're going to grow very much. He's pouring his heart and soul into it. And that was pretty reassuring. Now, one thing you should keep in mind is managers are really good salespeople. When I wanted to sell someone on my team, I absolutely did. And I probably could have done this even on my way out from Uber, because that's what managers do. You look out for your team and you sell, and you're able to be positive, and you have experience with this. Now, I'm not saying don't trust managers, because managers really should tell you the truth, but you can bend things here and there, and you can also feel out what is important for people and focus on those things. Now, the people who will typically give you the real deal are engineers. So when I talked with one of the most senior engineers, actually one of the first engineers at Uber, I did a similar reverse interview with them, and they gave the whole thing to me a lot more raw and a lot more authentic. And I asked similar stuff to them. Why they're excited about this? How do they see the office growing? Now, they were not nearly as positive as my manager, but they told me the people that they like on the team, how they find that the work is actually pretty hard, but they felt that they kept growing even after 6 years at Uber. And that information was a lot more raw, and I could work a lot more with that. And it seemed that this was a good place, and that's why I joined. So my suggestion to this person, and even to anyone who gets an offer from a company, is if you're unsure and if you have nagging feelings, especially in this COVID era where we're talking over Zoom, do some negotiation, and if there's interest, I can do a video about that. But the second part is reverse interview your future manager. Definitely talk with your future manager before you accept. Ask them about the things that you care about: career growth, impact, opportunities, what the team is going, what your role will be, where they see opportunities, how they support people, those kind of things. And if you can, or if you're unsure, ask to talk with one of the most tenured engineers on the team, the person who's been there the longest, and ask them the same thing. And I guarantee if this person talks with their future team at Amazon and their future team at DoorDash, they'll have a light switch and they'll be able to make the right decision. Maybe it's going to be DoorDash, maybe it's going to be Amazon. Now, if you ask about my personal preference, it would probably be DoorDash, just because I know so many people from there and I will talk with them, I will get their opinion. And also everything I've heard from there, it seems that the culture is similar to what it was like at Uber, minus some of the negativity, and I personally would prefer that. Also, it's very different if you know people. Knowing people, especially the more senior you are, makes a huge difference. It makes it easier to get started. It makes it easier to integrate. It gets easier to be up to speed. It also makes it easier to make sure that you're performing at whatever the expectations are. Now, that being said, if you don't know people at this other company, at DoorDash or Amazon, don't take my advice, because it might not be applicable for you. So just do your research, talk to your future manager and potentially a future team member, and based on this, you should be able to make a good decision. If you're still unable to make a decision, toss a coin and go with Amazon. What? If you found this video useful, do hit the like button. I make videos on software engineering and engineering management related topics. Subscribe for similar content. Thanks.